This next step in retouching photos is dodging and burning. This is a very important step and one of the most popular for any Photoshop retouchers. So we've looked at the dodge and burn tool in the past, and if you take this, you can go to pretty much any layer and just start to brighten or decrease the exposure of that layer. That's not how we're going to do it when we are adjusting our photo. We're going to do this in a non-destructive way, so we're going to create a new layer. And then with a brush, instead of the dodge and burn tool, we're basically going to be dodging and burning. So with the brush and with a white brush, with our opacity at 100 and our flow at 5, you'll see what happens when we start to brush onto this layer. And I'm just going to call this highlights. Or actually, we'll call this dodge, which is to brighten. So if I brush over parts of this image, you'll start to see that it starts to get brighter, right? So that starts to look a little bit unnatural if I'm painting over here like this. But if we change the blend mode to soft light, it starts to look a little bit more natural. Now, I just painted all over her face, and that's not what you want to do, but I just wanted to show you what that looks like. All right, so first we also want to turn this into a layer mask so we can undo what we've done in the past. So what we want to do in essence with the dodging and burning is highlight the highlights and darken some of the darker parts of her skin or parts of the image to really accentuate the contrast of her skin. So for this photo, we would brighten up, and see how I have the flow down at 5%. That's good because it's going to just make sure that this isn't too powerful when I'm doing one brush stroke. And again, let me make sure this is on soft light. All right, so I'm just going to paint over the highlights of her cheeks like so, over the tops of her eyebrows, a little bit on her forehead up here. You're really just following the brighter parts of the image. So her chin down here, even down here, some of the highlights of her skin. And don't worry if you go a little bit too far. You can always bring back the opacity of this entire layer, and that will help you out. You could also decrease the opacity up there if you think you're being a little bit too pushy with this. There might be parts that you want to brighten up, like the bridge of her nose right here. I kind of want to brighten up just a little bit, just the bridge itself. And now if I turn this on and off, you can see what this is doing. Now it's really accentuating that, and we have a tendency to push it a little bit too far, so there's a couple things we can do. One is if we double click this layer, we actually have blending options for the layer. We haven't looked at this, but in the main blending options, we're on the soft light mode. Here are a couple sliders down here, and let me just tell you what this is doing. If you hold the option key and click this bottom left little nub down here and start to drag to the right, you'll see in the image, and I'll move this over to the side so you can see it. You'll see in the image, and again, I'm holding option down, you'll see that let's hold option and the right, just get the right one, not both of them, just the right one. You'll see in the image that what we've painted on starts to disappear a little bit. And the reason is because it's telling Photoshop that we don't want what we've just painted on to affect the darks or the shadows, which is the left part of this bar. And so for areas like in her eyebrows, we don't want it to, the eyebrow hair anyways, we don't want that to be brightened. We just want the top of her eyebrow to be brightened a little bit. So by extending this makes it look a little bit more natural, okay? So we can turn this on and off. Again, it's a little bit much, so we might drop down the opacity later on. But first, I'm going to do some burning. So again, we're going to create a new layer, call it burn. This time, you have the option of switching to a black brush And also, we got to switch this to soft light for this layer. And you're painting on the darker parts. And you can see here, I'm getting pretty dramatic with her cheekbones right there. So I'm going to undo that. And that can kind of happen when you're using black. I want to use a different color. So I'm going to press the Option key when I have the brush selected. This is a color picker, and you can pick kind of like a darker part of her skin tone that you want to use. I don't want to necessarily use that blush because it's a little bit too red, but down here in her neck area, the shadow looks kind of good. Now let's open up that color picker and let's make it a little bit darker and less saturated. But that should look a little bit more natural when we are burning compared to the black, which actually desaturates some of the colors as well. So to accentuate the lines in her cheek right here, that's often something you typically will do with dodging and burning. You know, the shadows right here underneath her chin, underneath her eyebrows, on top of her eyes. Right here in the bridge of her nose on the inside. Right on the bottom of the nose. Even in her lips, you might want to just in the crease, dodge that a little bit. Just following the parts that are naturally a little bit darker already. Now this could take a while if you're really being particular with it. I'm going to turn down my opacity and just do let's do 25 is good, and go over her full cheek. All right, so now if we turn this on and off, you can start to see what's happening, and you start to see that much more dramatic look, okay? Again, we can double click the burn, and this time we're going to Option click the right side to separate this point right here. So now we're saying that we want this to sort of pass through the highlights. We don't want this to affect the highlights. We just want this to affect more of the darks, right? So that's going to look a little bit more natural that way. So let's take this, drag to the left. Now that looks a lot more natural. Let's go ahead and group these. A keyboard shortcut for grouping is Command G. So if you didn't know that yet, Command G. We're going to call this Dodge Burn. And here we can now decrease the opacity. Maybe 80 or so is a little bit more natural. We don't want to go completely unnatural, but again, for that more stylized portrait, this is what you're looking to do. So that's dodging and burning. Again, this is something that you can play around with a lot. I'm going to go into the burn again. And again, some of parts of the hair, just go in. Parts of the hair, you might want to just change that contrast. And then for dodge, make sure you're switching over to the white. You can also press X to swap between those two now. Just for these parts of the hair that are already highlighted. Also in the main parts of the lip, we're going to highlight just a little bit too. And that's looking pretty good. Cool, so that's dodging and burning. We got a couple steps left just to enhance the eye color and also the lips, but we're pretty much moving forward with retouching, and you know a lot by now. So hopefully you feel like you're getting better at Photoshop, because you truly are. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next lesson.